Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Jay Christensen. I'm alongside Melissa Doramas here, and welcome to another episode of Reentry Roads, proudly presented by Workbay. In this podcast, it's going to be dedicated to exploring the journey of individuals that are transitioning from incarceration back into society. And we're not just celebrating the successes, we're diving into the obstacles, whether they're real or perceived. To truly understand what makes the difference between successful reentry and the challenges that arise, we are bringing it into a full perspective, talking to returning citizens as well as correctional professionals. And today, we have the privilege of welcoming Cory Barrier, Deputy Chief with the Idaho Department of Corrections, Probation and Parole. Cory brings 17 years of experience working directly with returning citizens and supervising staff statewide in the same mission. He also spent 5 years serving as in Ada County's drug court and veterans treatment court programs. And with that, let's bring Cory on.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I know we've been trying to get together for a little while, Cory, and we finally were able to make it happen today. So I'm really appreciating it.
Of course, anytime we get an opportunity to talk about what we do and how we can do it better, I'm all about it. So I appreciate you having me on.
All right. So Cory, can you kind of give a little bit of your background? I'm thinking that there might even be some people out there possibly that wants to know what a probation and parole officer does, maybe is even interested in becoming one. So if you could give your background and maybe the day in the life of a probation and parole officer, I think that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, you bet. So I started out my career. I'm actually a military spouse. I was at the time. My wife was an active duty Air Force member. We lived overseas, and as we were getting ready to transition back to the States, I had some friends. I had graduated from Boise State with a criminal justice degree and wanted to kind of get in the field. And so I had some friends at the time that worked in police agencies locally, and I thought, man, that sounds really cool. I grew up watching Cops with my mom, and so I was very motivated to engage in the law enforcement field. So during that transition, I was going through the hiring process with the local agency here in Boise. And because that process takes time, I started doing an internship with probation and parole. And I found that I really loved the work. I felt like it was my family. I mean, my coworkers, the mission, all those things really were appealing to me. I was at least mature enough at the time to know that I didn't want to have any regrets down the road. And so I saw the opportunity to become a police officer pursued that for a few years. But I ultimately always had that kind of drive to want to go back to P&P and just kind of continue on in that work. The one thing that was appealing was some flexibility that the job offered that I didn't get so much in the traditional police work, just, shift work and things like that. And so that's kind of how I got back into it. And I was a probation and parole officer supervising a variety of caseloads. I supervised sex offenders for a period of time, but I really found my wings and really saw the value in the work when I was working with the treatment court programs. That team kind of collaborative problem-solving collective was effective, and getting to see the success and the outcomes of clients was really motivating for me. I did a lot of different things outside of just being a traditional PO, if you will. I was a trainer in firearms and other topics. I then moved into our training division, became a training supervisor, and ran academies for correctional officers and probation and parole officers. And so I did that for a number of years, and then had an opportunity to go back to the field as a deputy district manager in one of our regions, and then district manager. And, my motivation throughout my career has never been about what's in it for me. Rather, how can I impact other people? And over time, that's really shifted from, the clients that we serve to the staff. How can I empower, encourage, build trust, and just highlight the amazing work they do in helping facilitate change for the people on supervision. So it's always been about impact for me. And if I feel like I have something to give in that area, then that's been my motivation to kind of seek that out. So um, no job is small by any means,
Right.
but it's all tough work in corrections. But that's kind of the general gist of my journey.
What is the typical caseload of, let's say, a District 4 probation and parole officer?
Yeah, so it can depend. It depends on the type of offender that PO might be supervising. Our sex offender population or sex offender caseloads tend to be a little bit smaller than, say, like a general caseload. But around that 70 range is pretty typical.
So can you kind of just give a real quick rundown, thinking back to your probation and parole officer days when you go in? I know not every day is going to be the same. Every day is going to be a little bit different. But can you kind of give us a rundown of what a typical day might look like?
Yeah, I don't want to change the subject. I just kind of want to give you kind of my experience of how I approach the work and how things have kind of changed over time. Um, as a young PO and being officers of the court that we are, I would slide a court order across the desk to a client and say, all right, the judge has these special conditions that you need to follow and accomplish while you're on supervision. And it was easy for me to kind of instruct people on what to do, and then never really put myself in their shoes to understand how difficult that might be. If I'm asking for 100 hours of community service to be done, but that person doesn't have a place to live or food to eat, like, am I meeting them where they're at? And so I think kind of maybe just through maturity and over time, how things have shifted is really kind of taking a better look at where our clients are and then meeting them where they're at and helping them move along the path toward success. So a day in a life of a PO looks a lot like, you're meeting with clients in an office setting. You're having conversations with them. We use different techniques. We're all trained in motivational interviewing. In the last couple of years, we've started using the EPICS model, which is effective practices and community supervision. And it's really taking a look at, we know that thinking drives behavior. And if we can really address the thinking behind decisions, then we can have a greater impact on overall success. So I would say it's a very engaging, mindful exercise in how we're communicating with people all day long. Obviously, we're working in the field. We're kind of evaluating living situations, supportive people in the homes. I mean, it's a very dynamic job, and I think that's what I love about it, is just every day is a little bit different. But at the root of everything, we follow core correctional practices. We do assessment-based supervision. So we use an assessment tool to help us identify risk and then target high risk, high need areas, build case plans on that, and then really work with the client to address those areas. For all the POs that might be listening to this, or current POs or former POs, I mean, there's a lot more nuance to it. Those are just some of the high points, but I do love the dynamics of being a PO. It's just never the same every day. It's always something different.
So Cory, you're taking it from, and Jay asked you from the staff side of what that looks like. for a PO. I just want to go to the other side for a minute and ask you, to you, what does successful rehabilitation look like? You talked about all the different things that you guys are implementing. So how do you know when you've had a successful rehabilitation?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question, Melissa. One that I've pondered many times. Like, what does success look like? And at the very heart of it, to me, success is a choice. Our clients that we supervise have to make a choice. They have to decide if they're going to be successful or not. As a staff member, as a PO, as a leader, making the decision that you're going to see success will help you kind of fulfill that. So it looks different depending on, if we're looking at data, how do you define success out of outcomes that data might support? But kind of at the crux of all of it, it's a choice that individuals make, one, and then two, like our role as correctional professionals is really how do we create the opportunities for people to achieve that success for themselves. Now, we can't do it for them, but we can encourage them, we can coach them, we can hold them accountable if we need to. Ultimately, that decision boils down to them. So it's a tough question because there's just a number of different ways you can define success. But maybe that gives you kind of my philosophical kind of feeling on the topic.
So, Cory, going completely the other side of that pendulum, going back, I think about the times that when I was in corrections, I would have somebody told me they were violated for drinking a beer, and then I would go read the official report and find out it wasn't really that. But is it that one beer that he really thinks is what caused him to come back? So I guess my question to you, and this is one of the things that we're wanting to uncover with this podcast, is the difference between the perceived and the reality. And what I'd like to hear from you is, what was the most common thing that was behind recidivism in your experience? What stands out the most?
Yeah. Well, to kind of comment on the first thing you said, perception is everybody's reality. And so if an offender is perceiving that they were violated because, it was one beer, that's their perception of it. So that's their reality. It's hard to argue with that. But my guess is there's a lot more nuanced, and that was probably a behavior that maybe broke the camel's back, straw that broke the camel's back, because I don't see POs, overly aggressive unless they need to be in terms of violating somebody. So yeah, there's probably more to the story in a lot of those situations. And then remind me, Jay, what was the second part of that? Oh,
that particular story, there was a whole lot more to it. There was a car theft involved, a car accident, an injury, and other things. But he was drunk while it was all taking place. And so I don't think it really was his reality. I think it was his embarrassment that he didn't tell me about it. But I just use that as an example. But what I'm curious about, what is the most common thing? Is it drinking? Is it drugs? Is it going right back to the same crowds he used to be with? Is it none of those?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a combination. It's a combination of all those things. We all as humans want to be connected to people. And sometimes those connections aren't pro-social, or they're not positive influences. So I do see that a lot of the slippery slope, if you will, really can begin with, who am I connected with? Who am I surrounding myself with? And do they truly have my best interest in mind? Are they going to hold me accountable when I'm not doing the right things? That's one component. One small mistake leads to another mistake, leads to bigger mistakes and in worse decisions. So I think it's kind of a snowball effect. The reality is I'm not perfect. I'm far from it. And so are the people that we supervise. They make mistakes, and their struggles. And some of the struggles are real, and they're to overcome them would require even more will and dedication and resilience than even maybe I have. But it's really supporting yourself with positive people around you. I see your connections in the community really do matter, because you step down that slippery slope, like I said, and things can kind of compound quickly. So I really do think it's a combination of things. The other thing I think that people struggle with is, there's a sense of feeling overwhelmed. Looking at somebody that's walking out of the prison gates and you're showing up at a probation and parole office, I want to believe, and I do believe, that people want to do well. They're walking into our office and they want to do the right things. They want to do it different this time. They don't want the pain and the suffering that they've had in their life. But it's hard. It's hard. And it takes, it's not easy to get all the things you need. Transportation is difficult. If you can't get to and from a job, or if you have a job, like, what do you do? I mean, it's easy to deal with stress if you don't have healthy ways of dealing with stress or dealing with adversity. It's easy to slip back into, old behaviors, because that's a coping mechanism. So there's just a lot of factors that go into outcomes, if you will, or somebody's likelihood of success. But that's where I feel like probation and parole has a key role in the criminal justice system, is we can help facilitate those things by getting to know people, and oftentimes knowing that we are, maybe one of a handful of pro-social support systems folks have in the community, and our relationship with our clients is hugely impactful on their long-term success. So fine-tuning that, finding the right people that believe in that mission and they want to do the right thing. And I'm saying that with a balance. We can't just turn a blind eye or, excuse behavior. We can do accountability, but accountability looks like a lot of different things. It doesn't look like just putting handcuffs on somebody. There's a spectrum, and trusting our staff, empowering them to, and then equipping them with training and skills that make them effective in building rapport and helping people, see how positive change can be better for them. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, but establishing incremental goals and steps along that path, and then getting them to see their success. And that is the most kind of energizing thing for me about being a PO, is when you get to see those moments and you get to see somebody's trajectory change because they decided to do it for themselves, but you got to be part of that journey and influence that.
Yeah.
So
one of the wins.
Yeah, exactly. Cory, so you're talking about support, and I know how critical support can be for someone who is going through this rehabilitation process. And so my question is, whether it's family support, because it can be family support, but it's not always that you have family support. So just outside support in general, Are there things that people can get involved in as the person's going through that rehabilitation? Are there programs or anything else that you would say has shown a positive, something positive that's happened for that person because that support is part of that? Because I think a lot of family too may not know exactly how to support, or friends or somebody who is a positive influence for that person may want to be there for them, but just don't maybe know how to be that positive support, or may need some guidance.
Yeah. That's a great question. And, it reminds me of a story. I was with my son a couple months ago, and he wanted to get some goldfish at the grocery store. And I had no idea there was like 95 flavors of goldfish out there. And, I thought we were just going for goldfish. Well, you got there's not a one size fits all approach, right? Like, you might try one flavor and it doesn't work for you. So you know what? Let's try something else. I think that's where we have an opportunity to really make an impact in reentry, is getting away from the kind of one size fits all approach and having options for people. So to answer your question, it really depends on the person. And having a variety of tools and resources at your fingertips to make those connections. And maybe that doesn't work for that person, but let's try something else. What motivates them? What are they interested in? I mean, what comes to mind, I don't know if you're familiar with a nonprofit called the Phoenix. They do a lot of, health related activities, working out at gyms or going on hikes, going skiing, that kind of stuff. Like, that is a positive support system. I think the only requirement to join is you have to be sober.
Yeah.
I mean, so some people are really into that kind of physical health component. I know people and have seen great success from, AA programs. We have mentor program, Free to Succeed, where, folks are linked up with a community mentor where they can, work with them, just like as a person, not telling them what to do or how to do it, but just being a positive role model in their life. We have things like the connection and intervention stations that we just stood up in the last 4 or 5 years, all throughout the state, which is a customized, structured program. It's not treatment, but it's a program where people can get, based on their risk and need areas, a program that's just specific to their needs. Mm-hmm. We're seeing a lot more engagement from folks that are in our facilities right now. There's a program right now called RISE, which is a mentor program. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've got some staff and inmates side by side going through kind of leadership training. And I mean, just hearing from them is incredible. So they're finding positive supports there, and it's not only benefiting the inmate population, but it's benefiting our staff as well. And we're seeing accountability from our residents amongst each other. So like, there is just so many things, but I really think it depends on the person. Yeah. And helping them identify and see it for themselves. Sometimes if you can't see it for yourself, it's hard to make those connections. But I do think it takes a village, and the more variety of resources we can have out there available for people reentering, it really needs to be kind of specific to that person. And if it doesn't work, we pivot and try something different.
Yeah. The two programs that you mentioned are absolutely, it can be game changers for people, but I think you're absolutely right on target that it's not a one size fits all. And I think that's really important for people to hear, because, that's, everybody's different. Everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different path. You can put lots of programs out, but I think that the two that you mentioned definitely are two of the most positive that I've seen in a long time. So for sure.
So
Yeah,
I want to go ahead, Jay.
Oh, I was just going to say, just to cap that off, is that there's a local author that was a co-author in a book called Enlightened Leadership, and kind of the whole premise behind that book was, if you do more of the good with your staff, eventually a lot of that bad will go away. And it's a pretty simple concept, but it seems like that would work with everything. So you say no one size fits all. If you keep finding something that fits everybody and you keep doing more of that, then you're liable to eliminate some of the bad.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say was the other major impact that I think we as probation and parole can have on folks. And I'll give you a quick story that kind of speaks to this, but we deal with every day the bad things, and it's easy to identify. Somebody gets arrested, or they're doing some behavior that's in direct violation of their supervision. Like, it's easy to see and identify those things. What's much harder to measure and understand and see is the impact that we have in a positive way. Like my interaction with a client, because I treated them with respect and I was genuinely interested in them being successful, maybe that dissuaded them from leaving my office and making a bad decision that day. We can't measure that.
That's not a headliner, is it, Cory?
No, but I had an experience, and this is where I always tell POs, if you have an opportunity to be in this profession long enough, you will, when it comes full circle, it is the most amazing moment. But I was having a conversation in passing with a client. She was probably in her 60s. She was in drug court. She had been a user her entire life, and she had just gotten her GED. And I was walking, and I walking into the building, and I saw her standing out front, and I said, "Hey, I heard you got your GED. That's fantastic. Like, tell me about it. Like, that must have been hard work for you. Congratulations." I mean, it was a very just casual conversation, didn't last more than a minute. And I walked off and, went on with my day. Well, when she graduated the program, she said at her graduation that had the most impact on her, because nobody in her whole life had ever said that they were proud of her for doing anything. And just knowing like how much impact we can have in small moments, you just don't know. And you can't measure it. And if you're fortunate enough to see it come full circle, it makes a lot of sense. But I know that stuff happens every day. Yeah. In our relationships with the clients we supervise, and like that's the intangible impact that we can have, and we do have every day, that just it doesn't get a lot of headlines, because it's how do you capture it, right? Yeah.
That's great. I don't think we can hear him. We can't hear you. I'll go ahead and ask you a question, Cory, while he's getting all that figured out. So I just wanted to ask you, going to kind of shift the conversation a little bit, but I'm going to ask about employment in the community. And I know that community and employers sometimes are concerned about returning citizens and hiring someone who's been incarcerated. And how do you balance that, that conversation of public safety and second chance employment? I think that's something that comes up to us all the time. So I'm wondering, what does that look like for you?
Okay, you kind of broke up, but just
so
I can make sure I understand the question is, you're asking about like second chance employment for returning citizens, and
yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I just for like the community and employers that are willing to do a second chance employment. I'm just wondering, I'm just wondering how maybe you have those kinds of conversations with people in the community.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say kind of just overarchingly, it tends to shift kind of with the economy. I mean, I was a PO back, back in the was it 2008 kind of era, and jobs were difficult to come by for anybody. You know, we've been fortunate in the last, decade or so where, finding employment hasn't been as difficult for folks. But I think what the challenge for us is and I mean, there's some differences. There is differences between men and women when it comes to this, but like really setting people up for not just a job that pays the bills. Like we got to have that, but like what is going to fulfill you? What do you enjoy doing? How can we elevate and give you purpose and meaning in what you do? And so you're right. Like having those relationships with community employers. Is important. And I'll give you an example of where we really highlight that is in our community reentry centers. So these are folks who are technically incarcerated, but they're working out in the community every day. And then they come back to a facility. They pay, 35% of their earnings, and it kind of self-funds the CRC. We have really good outcomes with folks that leave on parole or top their time from a CRC because they are building up they've got, money in the bank. Generally, they've got some skills, they've got a solid foundation to fall on. So, and our CRCs all have employment coordinators, and they work every day to build relationships with community employers to make connections and things like that. And not only just, for your basic stuff, but like, what is something that could be a career for somebody? And we're always looking at building relationships with employers that, offer something that somebody can live on, and it just depends on the industry. There's a lot of correctional programs that we have that give people training and, welding and plumbing and all those different kinds of things. But when somebody transitions out to the community, like the setup is everything. Reentry really begins on the first day of incarceration. We know, that most people are getting out, and how are we starting to put the puzzle pieces in place to support that person when they get out on supervision? And again, like, there's some personal choice in that. Like, somebody's got to show up every day, be willing to learn and want to engage in whatever, training they're getting. But those relationships with employers is important for us. I talk with current inmates who are, working on getting, their apprenticeship. They're getting in with working towards something that can sustain them forever. And then that when you have a purpose, like people are just so much more likely to be successful.
Yeah, exactly. And you already mentioned somebody that you talked to that had received their GED. And so it sounds like a lot of programming before they're ever even going out to even look for a job to be able to, get them ready for a successful reentry.
Yeah.
For sure.
That education piece is huge. And not only the education piece, and then kind of tying back to what Jay asked about earlier, but reinforcing what you want to see. I know I'm no different. When my boss comes to me and says, "Hey, Cory, you did a great job here," like I'm more likely to repeat that behavior than if he's just hammering me every time I make a mistake. Well, it should be the same across the board. And in my current role, like it starts with me, like how am I modeling that every day? So I can't expect anybody to do anything that I'm not doing for them in the first place.
So, Cory, everybody hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Cory, I wanted to ask you. My son also works for the department, and it sounds like he's almost following your same. He worked as a probation and parole officer. He worked in drug court. He's now a training instructor. He does a lot of. He's a second generation correctional employee, but so are you. Can you tell me about that? Because I worked with your father.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Nick is an asset to the Department of Corrections here in Idaho. He does a fantastic job in training and taking some really difficult, hard concepts and making them easy for people to understand. And, I think about my days as a trainer, and then I look at people like Nick and I'm like, he's doing a way better job than I ever did. So he's a big asset for the department. And I'm not just saying that to you, Jay, because you're his father. I mean it. Like you mentioned, I am a second generation correctional person, and I as a young person, I never saw myself doing this work. I was never pushed to do this work. My dad was very supportive of me and my family, but I did have the benefit, and I'll give you a couple stories. So my dad started out as a probation and parole officer in Idaho when there just wasn't that many. We're over 220 POs now in the state, and I think in the mid 80s there was around 20 of them for the whole state. So I mean, things have changed drastically since then. But some of my most fond memories growing up as a kid was his coworkers were our family friends, and we were friends with their kids. And I do remember going on fishing trips or hunting trips, and, the coworkers riding in the car and they're talking about work. And I'm just like, man, is this what like old people do? Drive around and talk about, work all the time. But, I think my dad, he retired. He retired as a warden. He was a warden of South Idaho Correctional Institution, but he had worked at various other facilities. And, you have your good days and your bad days, and I can attest to that. But, I think the motivation for my dad was he really did care about the people that did the work, and supporting the people that did the work, because the work doesn't get done unless we take care of our people. And so I know there were times where he maybe got himself into a little bit of trouble doing things for staff that maybe he wasn't supposed to. But that was kind of one of the big takeaways for me was, how do you take care of staff? And the other part of it is he was, a progressive. He was a progressive thinker, not just how do we do corrections the same way, but really challenging the status quo and like do it better. And so I always appreciated that about him. And, those are kind of the lasting legacies that I take away from his experience. But when I run into people that knew my dad, that still work here or whatever, it's always interesting because I get a funny story about something kind of crazy he did or how mad he got, but then how good he was on the other side of supporting people and, pushing change forward. So, anybody that can last an entire career in the correctional field has my undying respect, because it is not an easy job.
Yeah, I can tell you another thing about him too is he went through all that time, all those positions and everything. I don't think I can recall or think of anybody that ever had any reason to say anything but positive stuff about the guy. Yeah. We all thought very highly of him. He thought highly of all the staff. He was very well respected. There's a road named after him out there. They call it Barrier's Bend, the corner right there by the shooting range.
Yeah. Yes, I do catch some flack for that from time to time. And I actually asked our director if maybe it was time to retire that sign just for my own personal benefit of not having to hear about it. But if we could give the sign to him. So not my decision, but, I think when staff recognize and appreciate your efforts, there is no better kind of recognition to get. You know, to me, if a staff member is saying like, "Hey, I appreciate something you did," like that means more to me than anything. Any award you might get or things like that. So, I think that was a reflection of staff recognition. Yeah.
I agree.
So, Cory, you've talked about a lot of changes and changes, of course, from when your dad started in this space and now with you. And I'm just curious to know, because, you know, technology is a big part of those changes that are happening. So can you tell me some things that have changed recently or, you know, with technology and data and how you're using that right now with your staff? Because a lot of times with technology, those changes are coming really fast, and that's hard to sometimes navigate. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Can you give me a little bit of information on that?
Yeah. So, you know, I'm a very much hey, if it sounds good, let's try it, see what happens. And if it doesn't work, let's like not dwell on it. Let's just pivot and try something else. But I've come to appreciate and understand the value that data can tell us in helping us inform decision making. So you have two kind of aspects. You have the quantitative components of data and what you can learn from it and how you can make adjustments. But then there's also the qualitative component of data that's a little bit, you can influence the data based on the quality of the service that you're providing, that direct service. What's the experience like, and how does that factor in? So we have used a lot more data to kind of understand like, hey, we're saying we're doing these things, but what are the outcomes we're getting from it? And then using like legitimate data to help inform decision making. And the one thing I appreciate about the executive leadership team here is like it's not a gotcha. It's a what can we learn from it? What adjustments do we need to make? And like let's use it to our advantage versus just trying to tell the story that we want to tell from it. There's a lot more using data transparently too. I think there's a lot of information that we put into correctional systems, you know, data systems. You know, what are we doing to like share that with our staff? Like they want to see the impact. Stakeholders, same thing. So there's been a lot of more effort recently to like be transparent with some of our data. Technology is, it is ever evolving, and I never thought I'd be, because I was always on the cutting edge as a young person, and now I'm like, wait, what? Like I struggle to keep up sometimes, but there's some real advantages to technology with, you know, kind of implementation of, you know, body worn cameras and, you know, correctional systems, how, you know, data systems, how we leverage, we work with a company called Recidiviz, and we've been able to communicate with clients more broadly using text messaging and things like that. There's a host of, you know, thinking about the electronic monitoring space and not just the kind of, you know, leg worn GPS units anymore, but the technology associated with, you know, check-in apps on people's phones. And I mean, there's just a lot that we can do. And I've seen us, and you know, corrections is, we sometimes lag behind in adopting technology. But you know, we're always evolving. I think probably the next kind of evolution is like, how do we start incorporating AI technologies into our work in a way that, you know, stands up in court, but it is a benefit, increases efficiency and things like that. So it's ever evolving and changing. But I do think it keeps kind of us connected with people. It's all connection. It will never replace the value of face to face, but it does kind of force multiply our ability to be more efficient in certain ways.
Yeah, I like your open-mindedness to that, because not everybody that is a part of corrections is like, I totally get it. It can be scary to think about, but I think that I think it's great that you're open to the change, because it's change that's coming for sure, right? We all are feeling that in whatever space we're in, for sure.
Yeah.
So.
I think correctional professionals can really be successful when they get curious.
Yes.
Whether you're a frontline PO or you're an administrator, like being curious about what's out there and just being open to, hey, I don't know if this would be good or not, but let's get curious about it and find out. So that's always been my approach.
Yeah. So we were talking about data a little bit. I was wondering if you're able to speak a little bit about recidivism measurements. I'm curious whether recidivism is measured when it's a technical violation, because I don't think all states do measure that, but some states do.
Yeah, this is a really complicated question, Jay, because it really does depend on how you define recidivism and the parameters around what it is.
And there's no national standard for it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't believe so. I think people count recidivism in different ways in different states. Mm-hmm. And, not saying that one's wrong and one's right. In Idaho, we do count like a violation would be counted as in recidivism, a technical violation, if you will.
Yeah, and then 50 miles away from you, they don't. In a different state.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, ours is 3 years after a term of jail or imprisonment, and if you're going back, I mean, and as you would imagine, our people returning back to prison or jail, the people we supervise, I mean, it's just too high. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, it's over 40% of the people are, so it's too high.
So to your point, if you're saying at 3 years counting technical violations, you're over 40%, and your neighboring state is saying they're at 30% recidivism, they can still be higher because they don't count technical violations and they go a full 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. There's differences in laws too, right? So that can influence those numbers as well. If somebody on parole receives a new felony, we're doing a violation on that. We don't see, actually, surprisingly enough, we don't see a ton of technical violations. I want to say it's like 10% of our total violations are technical only. A violation might have a new crime and other technical violations associated to it, but maybe what kind of pushed that over the edge was a new crime. But for technical only violations, it's around that 10% mark. And a lot of it's substance abuse and trying to find the right balance of, having somebody repeatedly use substances over and over again and trying to support them in their rehabilitation and engaging in treatment. Like, it's a balancing act, what's not enough and what's too much in terms of giving somebody a chance. We know that people who are addicted to substances, like, they're probably going to have some struggles with that. Expecting perfection right out of the gate. So we know that that's going to be a struggle. So how are we engaging, making referrals and things like that? But where do you draw the line? Like, what's too much? And that's a hard, that's why these positions as our probation and parole officers, they're difficult, they're challenging, because there isn't a line in the sand that says you do this and it's easy. You got to.
And then you're also responsible to the taxpayers. And do you want to put this person back in prison at a rate of this much per day because he struggled and was caught 2 different times with a substance?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the figure right now, and I mean, it kind of changes a little bit, but it costs about $6.31 a day to supervise somebody in the community on supervision. So
as opposed to probably over 100, or it depends on which facility it's at, but probably close to that area.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't have that figure in front of me, but it's much higher for sure.
Melissa, did you have anything else for Cory?
I have enjoyed this immensely, and we could probably go on all day with all the questions that we can go back and forth with. But I am I've enjoyed this very much, and having these conversations, and I'll take it back to you, Jay.
So Cory, before we close out here, I'd like to give you an opportunity to say whatever you like. Is there a message you'd like to give to the public? A message you'd like to give to someone thinking about coming to work for you? A message you'd like to give to your clientele? Anything you'd like to say? It's yours.
Wow. Those are dangerous waters to tread in, Jay, because I'm a talker and I can go on for a long time, but to the staff, like in Idaho and around the country who do this work, there's no measure for the impact that you have, but the meaningful work that you do is so important and can make such a difference for people. And I just encourage you and, myself included, is like becoming a more skilled practitioner of being a PO or working in the correctional space, and whatever your role is, whether you're a pre-sentence investigator, it just makes us better and makes us more effective. So encouraging people to get curious, stay engaged, and just know that you're making a difference. You're making a difference in your communities. And whether you're putting handcuffs on somebody or you're, doing an intervention with them or a sanction, like those things are public safety. When our inmates, clients, they're feeling like they're supported, it just increases their chance to be successful. So, and then, just balancing that, and then it kind of overarching, we talk about accountability, and what that looks like is really having a balanced approach. Accountability might look like an intervention, or it might look like putting handcuffs on somebody, but trying to kind of meet that person where they're at and move them along that spectrum of change that's a hard job, but it takes a lot of skill to be effective. So yeah, I'm gonna just stop there for everybody's benefit, but just a sincere appreciation for all the work that goes on all over the place in trying to execute public safety. So,
well, I can't thank you enough, Cory, for coming on. I know we've been talking about this for quite a while, and I'm glad we were able to finally put it together. I know you got a vacation coming up. I hope you and your family thoroughly enjoy it. I know you're going to a wonderful place, and I hope it turns out great for you.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity and, the ability to kind of talk about, what we're doing, what challenges we face. And I think the more we tell that story, the better we can get collectively as a criminal justice agencies locally, statewide and nationally. So just really appreciate the opportunity to be on here. So,
well, thanks again, Cory.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so that's going to be a wrap for today's episode of Reentry Roads, and we hope that this conversation has provided some valuable insight from a correctional professional who has worked closely with returning citizens. So a big thank you goes out to Cory Barrier, the Idaho Department of Correction, our chief videographer, James Librarian, and most importantly, you, our listeners, for being part of this journey. If today's discussion resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, share, and continue the conversation. We'll be back next time with more stories, insights, and perspectives from those navigating the road to reentry. And until then, stay informed, stay engaged. And if today's episode sparked new questions or topics for you that you'd like us to explore for you, drop us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And I also like to say that this podcast has been presented to you by Workbay. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.